Hey everybody, welcome back. CDL here. We are shooting another video for the modernized pre-trip inspection process. We're going to be going through each checkbox individually, and what you're going to be seeing here is your pre-trip inspection checklist. What you want to do is go through it in order from one box to the second, third, fourth, fifth. I do recommend that you keep this on you. As for a new one, this is allowed for your testing. Of course, us during training practice, we're going to be implementing this also as well too. So first, talking about what a pre-trip inspection is. A pre-trip inspection is you checking your vehicle before you go on the road, assuming that you're going over the road, or even if you're staying local, you do want to make sure that everything's in working order before you hit the road. All right, everybody. So the first thing you want to do before you actually get inside the truck and do your air brake test, or before you start your pre-trip inspection in general, is put your wheel chocks on your actual wheel. We're going to put one in front of the tire and one behind the tire. Right, so let's get started. What you'll let your examiner know after they tell you, okay, go ahead and begin your pre-trip inspection. You're going to word to them, or you're going to phrase to them, I am now ready to do my pre-trip inspection. Do you mind joining me inside the truck so that I can build pressure and begin my air brake test? That's going to be your first checkbox. Your air brake test is going to be the first thing you're going to do. Then you move on to the in-cab inspection. And then last, you're going to get down from the vehicle and continue with the outside of the truck. All right, now that we are inside the truck, first thing we want to start off with is putting our seatbelt on. Whenever you're inside the vehicle, make sure you have your seatbelt on at all times. Make sure it locks securely. I'm going to make sure that my shifter is in neutral by moving it left and right. Make sure it moves freely. Then I'm going to perform a safe start by pressing down my service brake and my clutch all the way. In order to start our air brake test, you want to build max pressure. Okay, every truck is a little bit different. Our vehicle builds pressure between 110 and 120 psi. We're going to do so that way we set up correctly and for our air leak test, then our warning buzzards, and then our tractor protection valve. So you'll tell your examiner, I'm going to start my air brake test first by building up max pressure between 110 and 120 psi at this time. Clutch down, service brake engaged, one hand on the steering wheel, turn your key forward, make sure your lights cycle. After your dash lights turn off, go ahead and turn the key forward. Double check again, you're in neutral. Both hands on the steering wheel, ease off of that clutch. You can rev it up. That way you get to your max PSI a little bit quicker. What we're going to be looking for here is for our governor. Your governor is a loud sneeze behind you. That right there was our governor. First step, of course, is building max pressure. Now we're going to move on to checking for any air leaks. Okay, the first couple of things you got to do before you can do that is just setting up for your air leak test. Number one, you're going to turn off your key, which you turn off your truck and thus cut off your air compressor. Number two, you're going to turn your key forward. This is going to send power to all of your gauges. You can't check for air leaks if you have no power going to your gauges. And then number three, you're going to push in your parking brake and your trailer brake knob. This will ensure that all of our lines now have air in the system, both in the tractor and the trailer. On a combination vehicle, you want to make sure that you don't lose more than 4 psi within 1 minute. We're going to do so, or check, by getting our stopwatch out, pressing down on our service brake after our pressure has stabilized. We'll press down on our service brake, then start our timer. You're going to let it go past 1 whole minute. This time you're making sure that your primary and secondary air gauges, they notice, do not move. When you first press down on your service brake, they are going to move slightly, but they should stabilize again after that. You're allowed to lose up to 4 psi on a combination vehicle, just not more than that. You can't lose 5. So while you're taking your test, you're going to tell your examiner, First, I'm going to check for any air leaks by holding down my service brake for 1 minute and not losing more than 4 psi. Don't get impatient. You can go past a minute. You don't want to stop it at 59 seconds though. After a minute has passed, you're going to stop your watch. You'll let your examiner know we did not lose more than 4 psi within 1 minute, meaning we have no air leaks. Next, I'm going to check my warning buzzards or my warning alarms by fanning my service brake down to 60 psi. At that time, my warning alarm should come on. My warning alarms have come on at 60 psi, meaning that they are working properly. Next, I'm going to check my tractor protection valve by fanning my service brake until my primary and secondary air gauges read between 20 and 40 psi. I'll know that my tractor protection valve is working properly when my parking brake and my trailer brake knobs pop out. For this exam, or for this part of your exam, make sure not to touch those knobs. You can always lean forward and make sure that your parking brake and trailer brake did pop out, but do not tug on them. That could be a fail. This concludes the first portion, or what's considered your air brake exam. After this, you're going to check your parking brake, your trailer brake, and then your service brake also as well. Now remember that list that I showed you guys at the very beginning. It's that list here. I'm going to fold it so it makes it a little bit easier for me to manage. You're allowed to use this check sheet just as a reminder. So first, we finished off our air brake check. Okay, I'm going to put a line through it. That includes you building pressure, you checking for any leaks, you checking your warning buzzards, and your tractor protection valve. Next, we're going to move on to our parking brake and trailer brake check. You're going to tell your examiner, next I'm ready to check my parking brake and my trailer brake, but first, do you mind if I remove my wheel chocks? You're going to unbuckle your seatbelt, get down and remove your wheel chocks. I'll do so at this time. Now that we've used our 3 points of contact to get down from the truck, I'm going to go ahead and remove the wheel chocks, then get back in so we can do our parking and trailer brake test. Alright, now that you've removed the wheel chocks from your wheel, first thing you want to do is put your seatbelt back on. Before you can check your parking brake and your trailer brake check, it's not on the list, but you do have to build pressure. If you don't build pressure, you cannot check your parking brake or your trailer brake adequately. So again, we're going to clutch and brake, make sure we're in neutral, and turn our key forward. Again, we're going to build pressure between 110 and 120 psi. We're going to be listening for the governor to cut off behind us. At that time, we'll proceed with our parking brake and our trailer brake. That sneeze just now was our governor cutting off behind us. That means that we've reached max PSI. In order to check our parking brake and our trailer brake, the whole point of that is to make sure that our brakes are locking on the wheel the way they're supposed to be. We're going to engage one of them at a time, okay, by releasing the opposite one and put it in a forward gear and making sure that we go nowhere. Think of it as your parking brake on a vehicle or emergency brake. Okay. Press down on your service brake, down on your clutch to put it into an actual gear. If I want to check my parking brake, which is my yellow one, I'm going to leave it out. That means that it's locked. I'm going to release my trailer brake. So what that looks like is you're going to tell your examiner, first I'm going to check my parking brake. Both hands on the steering wheel. Let off the service brake and slowly off the clutch until you feel it tug like it wants to go forward. But if your brakes are working correctly, it will not go anywhere. See how we rocked a little bit? That means that our brakes are working properly. You're going to tell your examiner my parking brake is working correctly. Next, I'm going to pull out my trailer air supply or my trailer brakes and push in my parking brake. You're going to tell your examiner I'm going to test my trailer brakes. Make sure you have it in the forward gear. Same process, move your foot off the service brake. Slowly let off that clutch so you feel the truck wanting to go forward. Nice little tug. Doesn't have to be too violent. Clutch and brake. Put your vehicle back in neutral. I'm going to tell your examiner my trailer brakes are working properly. I'm going to get my checklist back out. And I'm going to check off the next one. Parking and trailer brake. Try to get into the habit of using this checklist. Everybody's allowed to use this checklist. Do it in order. That way you get everything one at a time. Moving on to our service brake check. You're going to tell your examiner, next I'm going to check my service brake, which is my foot brake, by performing a hard stop at 5 miles per hour. In order to do so, you have to release your parking brake and your trailer brake. I'm going to do this maneuver in fourth gear. That way I do not have to accelerate. As soon as I let off that clutch, it'll climb up to 5 miles per hour by itself. I'm going to move off the service brake, slowly off the clutch. And all we're going to do is drive straight and perform a hard stop. Once I get to 5 miles per hour, you're going to clutch down first and then service brake. Put your vehicle in neutral, pull out your parking brake and your trailer brake, rest your feet. You're going to tell your examiner, my service brake is working because my truck did not pull to the left or the right and stayed in the middle. I'm going to get my checklist out again and I'm going to cross off service brake check. You're going to tell your examiner next, I'm going to move on to my lighting indicators. Alright, next we're going to be moving on to our lighting indicators. I'm going to do so first by turning off the truck, cycling the key forward. First I'm going to check to make sure that our ABS light and our DEF light are cycling correctly. Then I'm going to move on to the rest of my lights inside the vehicle. I'm going to start off with my left turn signal and my right turn signal are both properly mounted and secured and working correctly. My four-way flashers, or my hazard lights, are properly mounted and secured, working properly. Then I'm going to move on to my high beams as well, checking to make sure that they are working properly. They are properly mounted and secured, working properly. Then I'm going to move on to my emergency equipment, checking everything off as I go. Next, I have my emergency equipment. I'll let my examiner know that behind the passenger seat, I have my box of 3 reflective triangles and an extra box of fuses. Behind the driver's seat, I have my fire extinguisher, which is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken, and it is fully charged. Moving on to my windshield and traffic monitoring devices. This is a new addition for the modernized Pre-Trip. Traffic monitoring devices specifically is talking about cameras. There's a lot of new vehicles that come out with cameras all over the vehicle. If you do not have any cameras on the vehicle, just announce it to your examiner. You let them know my windshield and traffic monitoring devices are next. This time I do not have any cameras on this vehicle, but I am going to check my windshield and my mirrors. My mirrors and my windshield are both properly mounted and secure. They're not cracked or broken. They are clean, free from any illegal stickers, and my mirrors are set to the driver. Check that box off. Next, we're moving on to our wiper and our washers. Okay, in order to engage our windshield wipers and our washers, you're going to press down onto the lever until you see washer fluid come out of the washers. My next checkbox is my heater and my defroster. Okay, for this one, I'm going to turn the vehicle back on. Clutch and brake. For a safe start, make sure you're in neutral. I'm going to turn my heater knob all the way to the right, and then my defroster, I'm going to put it to the setting where my defroster is both over the dash and to my lower legs. Give it a second to engage. You're going to check over the top and down at the bottom. You're going to let your examiner know that your heater and your defroster are properly mounted and secured, and they are not cracked or broken, and they're working properly. Next, I'm moving on to my horns. On a Class A semi-truck, you have two different horns. You're going to have your city horn, and then you're going to have your air horn or your highway horn, which is usually at the top. On this particular vehicle, we have it over here at the left side. What that looks like, my city horn is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken and working properly. Make sure you sound it. Next, my highway horn is properly mounted and secured, not cracked or broken and working properly. I am now done with my horns checkbox. Moving on down to my external lights. At this time, you're going to tell your examiner, I'm moving on to check my external lights. Do you mind helping me check them? Your examiner is going to either agree or disagree. Hopefully they agree. They're going to get down. They're going to step to the front of the vehicle or ask you, which lights do you want me to check? Once they're outside the vehicle, of course, with the truck off, you're going to trigger your lights. So let's assume that they got off the vehicle. You turn off the truck, they're going to get down. You're going to cycle your key forward. You're going to turn your light switch on. It's not already on. You're going to check your left turn signal, your right turn signal, your high and your low beams, your four-way flashers, and your clearance lights. Every light you want to check, you are going to have to announce it through the window. You'll have your window down, and you'll be calling out every light, left turn signal, right turn signal, to your examiner that's outside. Give it a couple seconds for it to flash to actually prove that it's working, and your examiner is going to either give you a thumbs up or nothing at all. Once you're done with the ones in the front, your examiner is going to move to the back of the vehicle, and then we're going to check the same lights. We're going to check the left turn signal. They'll give you a thumbs up. Right turn signal, thumbs up again. Your hazard lights, thumbs up again. Your brake lights, thumbs up. And then your clearance lights also as well too. Once you're done checking the front and the back lights, you'll check off your box. Next, if you can see here, it says front of the vehicle, the engine area. Now we're going to get down from the vehicle and check all of our exterior components, our fluid levels, our suspension, our tires, stuff like that. Okay, we're going to move on to first talking about our lenses. Now this is a little bit different. Well, it's a lot different than the old pre-trip inspection. This is the new modernized method. We're going to do the air brakes first, which is what we just did, then the in-cab inspection, and now we're going to the outside of the vehicle. Okay, so it's kind of backwards. Moving on to the lenses. Now follow me outside while we do the outside inspection. All right, now that we're on the outside of the vehicle, we already checked our all external lights, where we checked the front lights and the back lights of the vehicle with your examiner. I'm going to move on to our front of vehicle engine area, first starting off with our lenses. Okay, so follow me to the front of the vehicle. Checking off on our lenses, we're going to start off with our headlights. My headlights are properly mounted and secured. They are not cracked or broken. They are working properly and in the right color. Next, I'm going to check my clearance lights up at top. They are properly mounted and secured. They are not cracked or broken. They are working properly and also in the correct color. At this moment, I'm going to go ahead and check off my lenses box. Next, I'm moving on to my fluid levels. For this part of your pre-trip inspection, you do have to open up the hood. Now that we checked the lenses, moving on to the fluid levels with the hood open, I'm going to check three particular fluids. I'm going to check my power steering fluid, I'm going to check my engine oil, and then I'm going to check my coolant. On this particular vehicle, it's on the passenger side of the vehicle. I'm going to make sure that all of these fluids are above the minimum, but below the maximum fill lines. Again, that's your power steering, engine oil, and your engine coolant. Moving on, next we got our fluid and air leaks. For this part of the exam, I'm going to check underneath the vehicle to make sure that there are no oil or water puddles underneath the truck, indicating that we have a leak. And then I'm also going to be checking for any audible air leaks as well. This is in regards to some of our air lines, suspension, our brake hoses, etc. After that, I'm moving on to my steering systems. My steering systems is comprised of 7 different components on this particular vehicle. I have my steering column and universal joints. They are properly mounted and secured, not cracked or broken, and not missing any nuts and bolts. My power steering gearbox is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken, also not missing any nuts and bolts. I'm also going to check that it's not leaking any power steering fluid. Then I'm moving on to my pitman arm down here at the bottom. My pitman arm is properly mounted and secured, not cracked or broken. Instead of nuts and bolts, I'm going to mention that it's not missing its castle nut or cotter pin. Next, I have my drag link down here. It's properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken, also not missing its castle nut or cotter pin. And then towards the back, a little bit out of the view of the camera, I have my upper and lower control arms, as well as my tie rod, which are also properly mounted and secured, not cracked or broken, and not missing its castle nut or its cotter pin either. Moving on to my tires. My tires, you're going to check your steering axle for your tires. My tires are properly mounted and secured. They are not cut, they have no bulges, and they are not leaking any air. My tire tread depth is a minimum of 4/32 of an inch of tire tread. It is evenly worn all the way around with no flat spots on it. I'm also going to include my valve stem for my tires checkbox. My valve stem is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken. It is not leaking any air, and I'm going to check that my tire is set to 100 psi. Checking off our box for tires. Make sure you use this checklist. All right, now moving on to our rims. We're going to check that our rims are properly mounted and secured. They are not cracked or broken. It's very, very important that you make sure that none of the studs are missing. We have caps on our studs here, but you would make sure that none of the studs are broken or missing, and that the bolt holes that they go through are not elongated. So it sounds something like my tire rim is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken. My studs are not missing or broken, and my bolt holes are not elongated. And you're going to check off your rims. Now we're moving on to our actual lug nuts. Okay, again, these are caps on top of the lug nuts. We would want to make sure that our lug nuts are properly mounted and secured. They are not cracked or broken. None of them are missing, and none of them appear to be loose, which would be shown by rust trails or shiny threads. And we are done with our lug nuts. Next, I'm going to move on to our springs, mounts, and airbags and shocks. All right, this axle, our steering axle, does not have any airbags. We're going to check our leaf springs, our leaf spring mount, and then our shock also as well too. My leaf spring mount is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken, and it is not missing any nuts and bolts. Moving on to my leaf spring itself. My leaf springs are properly mounted and secured. They are not cracked or broken, and they have not shifted. That means they're right on top of each other. They have not moved a single bit. Further back, also part of your suspension, is going to be your hydraulic shock absorber. Is this one in the back. My hydraulic shock absorber is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken. It is not missing any nuts and bolts, and it is not leaking any hydraulic fluid. Okay, now that we've taken care of our springs, our mounts, and our shocks, we're moving on to our brake lines, our hoses, and leaks. Now, particularly, we have our brake hoses right here. Our brake hoses are properly mounted and secured. They are not cut, frayed, or damaged, and they are not leaking any air. On a Class A vehicle, on a semi-tractor and trailer setup, our brakes are set up with air. We do not have any brake fluid. If you mention it is not leaking any brake fluid on this type of vehicle, you will not get credit for that checkbox. After that, we're going to move on to our brake contaminants. We want to make sure that there are no contaminants in between our brake linings and our brake drum. So we're going to point to our brake lining and our brake drum that are inside of the wheel. They are both properly mounted and secured. They are not cracked or broken, and they are free from any grease or oil buildup. Brake contaminants checkbox is done. Moving on to the side of the vehicle. Follow me to the side of the truck. Okay. we're moving on to our lenses and reflectors on the side of the vehicle. I'm going to check my lenses, and if we have reflectors on the side of the truck, I would also as well too. My lenses are properly mounted and secured. They are not cracked or broken, and they are in the right color. I'm done with that checkbox. Next, I'm going to check my traffic monitoring devices. You're going to announce to your examiner again that this vehicle is not equipped with any cameras, but instead, I'm going to check for my mirrors. My mirrors are properly mounted and secured. They are not cracked or broken. They are clean and set to the driver. Now moving on back down. The next check box is my battery. And again, guys, I can't stress enough how much you guys need to use this checklist, especially when you're training and when you're doing your exam. My batteries are properly mounted and secured. They are not cracked or broken. They are not leaking any battery acid. The terminals are not corroded. My battery cables are not showing any exposed wires, and my battery lid is on and secure. Next, I have my fuel tank and my DEF tank. I'll make sure that my fuel tank is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken. The cap is on and tight, and it is not leaking any fuel or diesel. Do not say gas. If you had a DEF tank, you would say something similar. This vehicle is not equipped with a DEF tank, but if you did have a DEF tank, you would make sure that it was properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken. It's got a cap on and tight. It is not leaking any DEF fluid, and it is filled to at least 1/8 of a tank. Moving on to my frames. I have 2 frames on a combination vehicle. The first one is my truck frame. My truck frame is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken. It is not missing any nuts and bolts, and it has no illegal holes. Moving on to my trailer frame. My trailer frame right here is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken. It is not missing any rivets or any nuts and bolts, and also has no holes. I'm also going to check underneath the trailer to make sure that the cross members and floor are properly mounted and secured. They are not cracked or broken, and there are no holes in the floor also as well. Okay, we're done with the side of the truck. I'm moving on to combination vehicles only. This is only for a combination. If you're on a Class B or a straight truck type of setup, you would stop here. But moving on to our combination vehicles only, follow me. So we talk about our airlines, our electrical, and our fifth wheel. Alrighty, we're moving on to combination vehicles only, starting off with our air and electric lines and connectors. I'm going to talk about the red one first. Our red one is our emergency line. It is properly mounted and secured between the tractor and the trailer with glad hands and a seal. For this part of your combination or for your pre-trip inspection, you got to make sure that they're actually secure on both ends. Make sure you touch them. They're connected with glad hands and a seal. The line is not cut, frayed, or damaged, and it is not leaking any air. Remember, they're air brakes. Next, I have the blue one. My blue one is my service line. My service line is properly mounted and secured between the tractor and the trailer, again with glad hands and a seal. Tug on it, make sure it's secure. It is not cut, frayed, or damaged, and not leaking any air. After that, we have our green one, which is our electrical line. We will make sure that it is properly mounted and secured between the tractor and the trailer. It is not cut, frayed, or damaged, has no exposed wires, and it's locked in place at both ends. After that, we're going to move on down to our fifth wheel skid plate. We're done with our air and electric lines, and moving on to our fifth wheel skid plate. All right, moving on to our fifth wheel skid plate. We're going to make sure that our fifth wheel skid plate is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken, and it is properly greased. Then I'm going to move on to my kingpin, apron, and gap. We're going to talk about our apron. Our apron is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken. Then I'm going to make sure that there is no gap between the skid plate and my apron. Then I'm going to go into the middle of the vehicle or underneath the trailer, looking into my fifth wheel opening, and make sure that my kingpin is also properly mounted and secured and not cracked or broken. After that, I'm going to move on to my locking and safety devices, which on this particular vehicle we have 3. Starting off with my locking jaws that are wrapped around the kingpin. I will make sure that they are properly mounted and secured. They are not cracked or broken, and they are locked around the shank of the kingpin. After that, I'm moving over to my trailer release handle, which is this piece right here. My trailer release handle is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken. It's in the locked position. And then lastly, my sliding mount locking pins. If you have a sliding fifth wheel, you do have to mention them. My sliding mount locking pins are properly mounted and secured. They are not cracked or broken. None of them are missing, and they are in the locked position extended outward. If I have a sliding fifth wheel, I do got to make sure that my sliding mechanism is also not leaking any air. Alrighty, we're down to the last couple of boxes. On our trailer only section, we have our landing gear and clearance. On this particular checkbox, we have 3 components. Starting off with our landing gear, which is the majority of what you see here, minus this piece here. My landing gear is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken. It is not missing any nuts and bolts and is in the upward position. Next, my crank handle. My crank handle is properly mounted and secured. It is not cracked or broken. It is not missing any nuts and bolts and is in the stowed position or the down position. And then lastly, I'm going to make sure that my gap between my landing gear and my axles is sufficient for when I make turns. Especially with a sliding fifth wheel, you want to make sure that your trailer is not too far forward, because when you go to make a turn, this landing gear is going to hit your mud flap assemblies. Okay. After that checkbox is clear. We're moving on to our reflective tape. We're right here already, right above the landing gear. You can talk about your reflective tape, otherwise known as your DOT tape. My DOT tape is properly mounted and secured. It is not torn or damaged and covering at least 50% of the side of the vehicle. Done with that. And then our last checkbox is our lenses and reflectors on the rear of the trailer. So if you want, go ahead and follow me to the back. Alrighty, now that we're back here, we're focusing on the lenses and the reflectors. I'm going to talk about my tail lights, specifically my brake lights, my turn signals, and my 4-way flashers. They are properly mounted and secured. They are not cracked or broken and in the correct color. My clearance lights down the middle, or sometimes they're up top. My clearance lights are properly mounted and secured. They are not cracked or broken. They're also in the right color. Lastly, in regards to the lights, my license plate light is properly mounted and secured, not cracked or broken, and also in the correct color. My reflective DOT tape on the back end of the vehicle is properly mounted and secured. It is not torn or damaged and covering at least 50% of the back of the trailer. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and check off the last check box. Make sure that I check every single box off. If I didn't, if I skipped it, this is a good time to go back and talk about whatever you missed. Before you do that, make sure you double check the rest of your vehicle as you're walking to the front of the vehicle. If you feel that you are done and you're completed with your pre-trip inspection, go ahead and let your examiner know, Mr. or Miss Examiner, I am now done with my pre-trip inspection. Okay? At that point, they will tell you either you passed or you failed, and then you're going to be moving on to your maneuver section.